This week on A to Z Running, we begin a series on getting started and restarted. What challenges do we face and how do we overcome them? We'll start by talking about the first priority.
In the world of running, Houston was bonkers. Do you know which legendary 18-year-old U.S. record just fell?
Also, it's a new year, and that means new decisions in the pro running scene. We've got the scoop on some of the biggest.
And the longest daily running streak just came to an end. We have thoughts to share.
All this and more on A to Z Running. Welcome back to A to Z Running, where we help runners thrive with information, inspiration, and coaching services. I'm Andy.
I am Zach, and you can learn everything you need to know about our services and what we do here at AtoZrunning.com, and follow us on the places we share content: Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. Just look for A to Z Running in those places. And you have a week left or so, depending on when you're listening to this, to decide if we might be a good fit for you for coaching services, because we're running a promotion right now where you can get the first 3 months at basically 50% off, as long as you reach out to us before February 1st. You don't have to actually start at February 1st, but you got to reach out to us before February 1st, and you can get the first 3 months at 50% off. It's a great deal. It's a wonderful
Great
thing.
deal.
Why should you reach out to A to Z Running about coaching services? Well, because we want you to, and we just asked you to nicely. And so why else would, what other reason? No, that is a funny joke. Because we have felt that the work we have set out to do, as we've described it here as helping runners thrive, we have felt that we have been able to find ways to be successful in that. And our athletes would attest to that. So if you go to atozrunning.com/coaching, we have a whole bunch of information about our services, including some testimonials from some of our athletes, as well as helpful information around what we do that we feel like helps runners thrive. For instance, we offer personal services. We are not trying to get people to pay for a training plan so that we can just sell you a copy of a PDF that we have made 1,000,000 times. Or we are not trying to sell you an AI service where you interact with robots and computers, and they claim to be able to help you run, although I'm not saying that the AIs and computers don't have good ways of generating training. In principle, our work is, we feel, most effective because it is personal and human. And so you're going to get a lot of that with us, and there's a lot more about that on atozrunning.com/coaching. But even more importantly, put in your email, tell us your situation, and we'll reach out and we can start a conversation and hear more about it. And you can ask us all the questions you want to ask us. So you can do all of that at atozrunning.com/coaching.
Well, I have a question
good.
that others have questions about. The questions
Your
about
question
your
is about
racing
their
that you
questions?
always like to not talk about your races, but we're trying to do more of the personal conversation. So I'm going to ask you, how did Resolution Run actually go for you? You didn't really talk about it on the podcast.
I think I forgot, maybe on purpose. That was a long time ago.
I know, but we're trying to
Memories.
see, again, like in this year of 2025, we want to share about what's going on in our running journeys a little bit as to be more personal, and so you can get to know us more as we get to know you more.
Maybe we should take a straw poll of listeners. Not that, but would you like to see more bite-sized content from A to Z Running about what we are doing and what our athletes are doing?
They've already said yes. People always
like YouTube
respond.
shorts and things like that.
Okay.
You know, how do
Maybe
people
YouTube shorts.
digest this stuff? I don't know. But anyway, yeah, Resolution Run was that 4-mile race that a lot of our athletes did. We had a large showing at that one, which is always lots of fun. I have run it a few times over the years, not a lot. And one of the reasons I like to do it is because that local kid who is a collegiate runner currently and is really fast.
He's a young man, Zach, even though he's a kid to you since you're like way older than him.
Half my age, so he can still be a child.
No.
But
Shout out to Evan Bishop from the area, who's an incredible athlete.
He's great. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's actually the point. He just, by the way, transferred to Oregon.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, he was running for Wisconsin. Now he's running for Oregon.
Okay.
But Bishop, and he comes out and runs because he's from that town where the race is held. It's his hometown, and so he's home for the holidays and runs it. He's done that a few times in the last few years, or maybe twice. I don't know exactly, but that's one of the reasons I actually like to do it, because it's like,
He's good.
maybe I could try to challenge him this time. Except this is also the worst time, literally the worst time of the year for me to run races and try to be competitive, because I am not trying to train competitively during this period of time. This is my like holiday in the British form of the word holiday, to just not be as focused aggressively on training. And I like to just do different things. And so I spend a lot more time in the weight room than normal in that month and things like that. So in any event, I'm not trying to make excuses or hedge, because I don't think that is worthwhile right now. But instead, what I am trying to articulate is how I do enjoy the event, and I find it unfortunate that I don't think it's the best timing for me to train as aggressively as,
because it's a great race to be challenged. Yeah.
So it was fun this year. I was not sure that I would actually even run it at a high effort this year, because I've been dealing with stuff that's just kind of delayed.
Old man stuff?
Yeah, no. Sure. And so I started the race. Actually, it was great. Longtime friend and co-runner. We ran on the elite team together, David Vandebunty. Shout out to Vandebunty. He showed up for the race, and I haven't seen him in a while. And he does some of these local races now and then. And so we got to chatting, and it was fun to start the race with him. And we ran together for the first chunk, and we were kind of talking about whether we would try to see if we could chase down. There were two guys in front of us. We were in third and fourth. And so we decided we should try to chase down that second place guy. And we went for it. We were about halfway into the race when we thought maybe it was time to go after it. And I did not catch him. I tried. I almost did, I think, in my head. But it was fun all the same. So a good time. Fun running with people that we know. Saw a ton of our athletes out there, which was always a blast. Yeah. Got to run with some friends. It's cool.
So I actually have an update this week. Woo!
Yeah.
I've been able to do some run walking without pain.
Walk
so,
running
hey.
or run walking?
Run walk and then walk run.
The point is you were moving and it didn't hurt.
I was moving. And I'm very thrilled of what that could possibly produce. And it's kind of fun that this series that Zach actually chose is very related to my current situation.
In fact, we are going to speak directly to, while we're talking about this series for the next few weeks, some of the things that Andy is working on currently.
Yeah.
And is a piece of the puzzle. So it's going to be relevant on many levels. Meta relevant.
Sweet. Well, after that exciting update, let's get on to our main topic, where we start a conversation about training and what to prioritize. There's a lot of reasons why you might be getting started or restarted. Maybe you're a first-time runner. Maybe you're coming back from injury like me. Maybe you're getting back into the swing of things after a holiday season that was just really chaotic. Whatever the reason is, there's probably been a time that you've had to start or restart running.
Yeah, and it's things like, injury, it's things like first-time runner, and it's things like I just needed to kind of hit reset because running was no longer a lovely thing. And so one of the things that we have to think about when we try to share with you what we're going to in the next few weeks is what things are true regardless of your circumstance. Because there are some. And how can we bring those thoughts? And then also what things might be different depending on your circumstance. And so what we want to try to do here is take just a few weeks and go through our primary, or I guess priority areas of focus that runners are considering as we start, restart, and otherwise. So that includes how to prioritize in the early days as you're getting back into the routine, what to do about motivation. We're going to talk about motivation because that's actually one of the biggest reasons why people don't continue a new thing that we start. And the idea of behavior change has a lot of baggage. And it might be good for us to understand what kinds of specific and particular baggages cling to runners when we're doing
or specifically cling to Andy, because we're going to get real here.
Okay. Didn't know, did you? You're going to get Some in-depth Andy. How about also just what to expect from our bodies? Fatigue, soreness, adaptation. How do I know that the thing I'm experiencing is normal at this point? Because the reality is, if you have been a runner and you had to take some time off and you're starting back up, even if that's happened before, you probably forgot what it felt like at the early stages of restarting. Most of us forget. It's not the same. You don't feel the way you do when you're in the midst of a season of training and you're in the routine and rhythm, or years of fairly consistent training with only minor disruptions, all of that. So we're going to talk about it because it matters. One of the things that inspired this reflection, not in this moment in time, but over the years, was when Andy had babies.
Oh, yeah.
Because pregnancies are pretty significant interruptions to your physiological activities in life. And they're good interruptions. We celebrate them. But when Andy birthed our 2 sons, she had to experience that kind of like, I'm starting again, and it's not like what it was before the baby. So that's one example of just there's so many layers here. So let's start by talking about the first priority and today's focus, which is movement.
Yeah.
You gotta move.
Gotta move your body.
Just gotta move. If you're not watching the video, you didn't just see Zach dance a little, so that was a special probably treat. Glad for that. But movement in terms of the just do it mindset and in terms of the do it well mindset. And so first priority when we're trying to build back into a running experience or build into for the first time a running experience is consistent, just establishing a consistent pattern, because your body is not going to really ever feel comfortable doing the thing until it's a normal thing for your body to do. And so in the early days, it never feels great. We'll talk about that in one of the later episodes, but it has to become routine, regular experience before that's going to change. And so we've got to find a way to just go out and do the thing. However, we also have said many, many times that there is a hierarchy of importance in terms of the things that we develop, our adaptations, and what to do first and why. And so if there are 3 primary physiological areas, and these are not the only ones necessarily, but this is how we categorize it, that helps to make sense in terms of training. 3 primary physiological areas are energy systems, musculoskeletal system, and neuromuscular system. And what we're meaning then is energy systems is like your aerobic capacity, anaerobic capacity, your body's ability to supply energy to continue pushing, right? Or whatever degree of effort. Musculoskeletal system is your body's capacity to actually handle the loading of the thing. Your muscles, your bones and stuff can actually do the work that you're asking of them. And then neuromuscular is your brain muscle connection, which is your ability to make your body do the thing. The will, you could say, to move, and the understanding of how to move. So you can make it happen, and you know how to make it happen in a certain way. And so that's not a terrible explanation. No,
it's not.
We often try to find ways to explain this that helps make it more practical, and we're trying to do our best with it. So that is a lot to ask of our bodies all at once. As a matter of fact, it's too much to ask of our bodies all at once, because you shouldn't try to adapt all of those areas simultaneously initially. And so they will all be adapting all the time to some degree, but your focal point matters here, and which is emphasized more than others because, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, but when you're at the beginning, like Zach said, simply it's movement, right? So when there are all of these layers to things, sometimes we have to just remember that simply we need to get out the door or down to the basement or to the gym, wherever it is we're going to be moving our body.
Yep. So the specifics matter a whole lot less in the early days than just finding a way to do it. That's really the message. And do it in such a way that you can do it again tomorrow. So don't go crazy on day 1, because day 2, you won't show up. You won't come back.
And that is probably one of the biggest pieces of advice for getting restarted.
Yeah, don't go crazy on day 1.
Don't go crazy on day 1 or week 1.
Why, Andy? Why is that so important?
Because it will set you backwards, not propel you forwards. And like Zach was saying, if you have in mind, it always is so good to have the goal in mind, saying that we want to have for the day. So this is going to be our specific goal for the day. I don't want to do something to such a degree that I'm going to feel terrible tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? So if we have in mind, I want to be able to repeat this tomorrow, then it helps us have self-control on today. And then it's going to help us be consistent. So this is a huge problem that I see many ambitious athletes get wrong. They go and they do too much, too soon, too quickly.
Preach it. Here's your mantra for the day or the week, because you're listening to this and it's a weekly podcast. Your mantra for the week: do nothing today that jeopardizes tomorrow's adaptations. Because we do that constantly. And so here's the situation. The first day that you feel really good and you're going out for a run, you're going to want to just eat it up. If you're restarting, it's that moment when it's like, I finally feel good again. I'm really going after now. Like, yes, I've arrived. And then the next day, you're going to not feel great again. But also, if you're new to it, it tends to be like the first day or the first week, you feel really like, oh, this is cool. For a bit, for initially you feel that way when you start, and then you don't as much because how could you? You just started. And so that's the mindset. Andy, you are so good. You've said it.
The other element that I wanted to interject about it is the run-walk approach, beginning with that, because this is another time that people often do too much too soon. So let's say you're a long-time runner and this is a restart for you. And it's really tempting to just go ahead and do all the running. And I feel good today. I'm just going to prolong this. I can just run the whole time. It's not really a big deal. And then not realize that your musculoskeletal resilience is just not there because you've had a huge amount of time off or you've been inconsistent for long periods of time. And it's okay to humble oneself and do the run walk.
Yeah.
And run walk is always a good approach in my opinion. And I think that sometimes it's difficult for people to allow themselves to do the walking when you don't really feel like you need it systems wise.
Like, my breathing is so easy.
It's fine.
That I should run harder. No. So that's Andy speaking to the hierarchy. Energy systems are the last thing we need to develop as an athlete. And the reason why is because to develop energy systems best, you need to be a sturdy, strong animal. And in order to be a sturdy, strong animal, you need to develop your musculoskeletal system to enough of a degree. And I don't say this like you don't develop one in isolation to its highest possible level before you move on to the other, because that doesn't actually even happen. But you develop it enough to a degree where you're more capable of adapting in the next capacity. In this instance, your energy systems are more capable of adapting when you are stronger and more resilient. Muscles and bones. So that's where we're walking backwards now. And if that's true, musculoskeletal system, by the way, your musculoskeletal system develops best when not just that you are stimulating it, but you're stimulating it well. In other words, the neuromuscular system, your mind-body connection, matters for developing your musculoskeletal system, because if you can move better, then your strength and stability develop more effectively. Or if you address areas of concern, like weakness and immobility, then you can develop those areas better. So that's where we want to start. When we say, what's the first priority? This idea of just get out and move is the key to just making something happen. But the thing that you should focus your attention on when you get out and move is not trying to run as long as you can. It's not trying to run as fast as you can. It's trying to move as well as you can. And there's a caveat, because that is not something that you should do while you're running initially. And here's why. Because Jay DeSherry says not to. Jay DeSherry, author of Running Rewired, and a source we will often refer to here at AtoZrunning, because not only has he supported the highest level runners and has been touted as one of the very best in the business in what he does, he also has written some books to demonstrate those ideas, and they are very important ideas. And so his point is, we need to first, before we start trying to develop all of these things, first establish the wiring, which is why he calls the book Running Rewired, establish the connection between our mind and our muscles well, so that the movement pattern that we go through as we're strengthening ourselves is the most optimized that it can be for us. And that's a high and lofty goal. So maybe we should just say it's good. It's good. And so that is what we need to do at the beginning, but we can't do it while we're running, because while you're running, one, studies have shown that attempts to improve your movement while you're running don't actually produce lasting change. As a matter of fact, they don't really produce hardly any change. But also, we tend to actually do it wrong, because while we're running, there's too many things going on. We're moving in too many ways at once, and we're thinking about other things, like if we're tired or whatever else is going on as we're running. And so instead, we find ways to isolate these things and work on them, not in exclusion. We're not only doing this all the time. We work on them in ways that help produce the right kind of repetition, a good movement, and then practice and rehearse that movement. Mm-hmm. And that's really it. It's actually a fairly simple thing. Step one is figuring out how to do the movement. And so, for example, put your foot flat on the ground. Can you push your big toe down and lift up all your other toes without anything else in your foot moving except your other toes? Can you do that just right now by thinking? Andy, did you?
Well, I've been practicing it.
Oh, bummer.
I've been doing toe
yoga. How about
yoga.
this? Flip it. Can you lift your big toe without lifting anything else in your foot just right away? So we're talking about, can you control the thing that's supposed to be? Now, this motion that I'm just describing is relevant because your foot, when you are contacting the ground and then moving off the ground, the part of your foot that it is and should be controlling that movement is your big toe predominantly. Mm-hmm. And so you should be able to consciously say, as I'm standing here, I can push my big toe into the ground, like the whole complex, not just the end of your toe, like the tips of your toes, but the ball of your foot where your big toe connects to your metatarsals and stuff. So can you do that? And that is an indication of an example. Now, there's a lot of other things. What do your arms look like when you just start moving them? Just stand still and move your arms as if you're running. What do they look like? And how much are they moving? Because there's an amount that is ideal, and it's a window, because it's not the same for every person. But what that becomes is, how can you make sure you do it well? When you drive your knee up, does your foot that's still on the ground, so I'm just standing put and driving my knee up. When you drive your knee up and your foot's still on the ground, does your back leg stay straight and through your back and your shoulders? Can you keep all of that straight while you drive the knee up without even thinking about it? Can that happen? And then when you bring it back down, can you drive your foot straight down under your body, under your hips, and the middle of your foot is contacting the ground? All of those things are optimized movement patterns, but most of that won't happen naturally for most people.
And don't be discouraged if you're kind of a mess.
Because you're starting
back.
Runner.
When you're starting back and when you're restarting things that maybe you didn't struggle with before, you might be struggling with. There might be things that are tight, and there might be things that are underdeveloped and overdeveloped. So don't be discouraged.
You have heard us say on air the phrase practicing running. Who first said that? I cannot remember who first said that.
Well, it's because I was talking to a coworker of mine who told me that they wanted to start practicing running.
I know, and I loved it so much
Yes.
that I co-opted the phrase, if that's the right word. And what it is in our minds, this idea of practicing running is what we're describing here, is practicing the things that we do when we're running. And the most disheartening thing to me is how many runners, some of you listening right now, I'm calling you out, how many runners have said, but I don't do those kinds of things because I'm not a serious runner, or I'm not fast like this person. And you have told me this in person at races and stuff. I've heard people say those exact things to me. And that's disheartening, because doing those things is not exclusive to like serious or competitive athletes. Doing those things is exclusive to people who want to feel better when they run. People who want to be better at running so that it's healthier and they can do it better and they can enjoy it more and all of that. So that's who does it.
Sorry, to tie in the first and second point, though, when you do this movement, right, and you're trying to keep it simple, you also are wanting to do a warm-up. And I think a lot of people, when they're like, I'm just doing 20 minutes, I'm not going to do the warm-up for 20 minutes of running. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
Yes, it is worth it. It's
It is.
part of your return. So I've been doing these short little run walks, but I've been doing my activation and my warm-ups before doing it.
Spending more time doing the pre-run exercises and drills than the run itself at times. Like, that's a true story.
It's true, and it's worth it. And I know it's so hard as a runner who maybe has even done marathons before to do a full warm-up for 20 minutes.
And here's what we're talking about, because it's not just, you're not just saying, well, I'm just warming my body up so that, because runners will say all the time, it's like, I just ease into the run. I just start slow and I warm up as I go, and then I get more comfortable and I find a good rhythm. That's something Lydiard used to talk about. I have told you before, I do not agree with every single thing Lydiard ever said. And one of the things is he heavily discounted the idea of warming up before a run. He's like, who needs to do that? Just, run until you feel warm, and then but the point is not just warming up in theory before a run. As a matter of fact, that's the lesser of the values you gain here. The point is reinforcing good movement so that when you start running, your body remembers how to do those movements and then continues to do them in the run itself. That's what we're talking about. And that's what, by the way, the phrase activation, if you've ever heard someone say activation drills, that's what they're talking about. They're not talking about activating so your muscles are warmed up. They're talking about activating so that the neuromuscular connections are now firing properly, and they're going to continue to fire.
And the efficiency is just spectacular. It's a super efficient thing to do, because instead of the time that it would take you, in fact, to warm up, which I do think that a lot of people can get, rolling, and some people have natural good neuromuscularity because they've been runners for so long, and they can get into maybe a fairly efficient run, maybe. What I'm saying is it takes 5 miles. Like, you know what I'm talking about. You longtime runners know what I'm talking about. When you're like, oh, I finally felt good 5 miles into my run. Okay, that's because you're finally warming into your run. Where if you would have just done a 5-minute pre-run routine, you might have felt better like right away. Yeah. So there's an efficiency to doing activation as well.
Certainly is. So we have established what is basically a 3-step dynamic here. Step 1 is you have to actually figure out those movement patterns. It has to be something that you actually can do. And so that's the hardest part, by the way. That is the hardest part, because for many of us, we always call it like lack of coordination. Runners are not very coordinated and things like that, which, by the way, is just not. It's not a fact. It's a stereotype, a trope of some kind, but may or may not be the case. And so what we're saying is you feel awkward trying to do those kinds of movements. Like, I feel like I can't really do it properly. And so we take a group of runners on a pre-run drills activity, and we do these skips, and we do these like alternating, skip types of things. And everyone's like, I can't even do that. Like, I'm going to try, and it just doesn't happen. It doesn't come out. Don't know how to move my body like that. It's like, well, that's because the the neuromuscular connection has not even been established yet. I don't know how to do that movement. And so we have to break it down as much as we have to break it down until we get to the point where we can do the movement, and then we build in the next layer, build in the next layer. So that's why I say we need to do these things in isolation, because, for instance, if you can't do a skip and strike properly, like striking the ground properly in isolation, you certainly can't do it while you're doing all these other movements and running. And so, not deliberately at least. And so there's a layer to that. Step one, we've got to figure out the movements. If you have no idea how to do that, we'd recommend 2 things to start. First, you can pick up Jay DeSherry's book, Running Rewired. He actually breaks it all down. He's got tons of different things you can do. He even has like tests to figure out, okay, do you have like dysfunction in your foot movement? And here's how you can test that. And what about your ankle movement, things like that. It's all there. He'll teach you in the book how to learn to move certain things in certain ways that you should. But also, this is one of those things that it's not terribly difficult to find good examples of this kind of stuff out there online. And true, and we'll say this a few times over the course of the thing, our pre-run drills are also a way to help figure this out. But what we have found, as many of you have reached out and adopted, or not adopted, but started to use some of our pre-run activities, that sometimes that still isn't enough because you're still struggling to actually do the motion. Like you can't emulate it very well. And so we can also provide further recommendations about how to break that down more. Now, this is a part where I would say for athletes that we coach, that's what we're doing constantly is, here's the resource. And if I can't quite figure out how to do that, or I need a little bit more, then we're getting on video calls with athletes and we're doing the drills together. And no, here, adjust your knee movement a little bit here. Okay, now you've got it. Now replicate that, things like that. And so it's difficult to do on your own. Find good resources. There's lots of them out there. Step 2, then, is you must rehearse the movement. And if you do not rehearse it often enough and with enough repetition, then it will never become automatic. It will never become autonomic function. And it must become autonomic function to truly translate to improving our running. And so that's why the pre-run activation drills, Andy said it earlier, that's why we say you must do that every single time you go for a run for the rest of your life if you want to gain the full benefits of it. And further still, in talking with a number of our athletes over the years who are doing something like that for the first time, and it's still awkward, like it's not something that happens naturally, I have to really think about it, then sometimes we encourage them to do it twice a day, just for a stretch, like for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something. It's not a strenuous thing. It's something you can do twice a day, and you're not going to like risk injury or something of that nature. It takes a little bit of time, 7 to 10 minutes. But the reason why is because the more repetition you have, when you're doing the movement properly, the sooner it becomes an unthinking process. So you got to rehearse or practice the movement. And the step 3, because I said it was a 3-step process, is now you can run better. There you go. You love step 3. It's the best of your steps. Okay. What about, I don't have time for this? Which is the question. If someone says, I'm willing to do it, I'm buying in, but I don't have time for this. And the answer is make time, because this is more important than most everything else you're doing at the earliest stages. So when I talk about your running volume and some of those things, you should cut your run shorter. If you really truly don't have enough time, 7 minutes to do this thing before your run, cut your run 7 minutes shorter for now.
And as I've said, it is a very efficient thing to do. It's going to get your heart rate up. So aerobically, you're not going to miss out too much with that 7 minutes because you're moving in a way that has your heart rate going. Like, I really don't see a lose to it. I mean, it is a bummer because a lot of people are tracking their runs and it won't show on Strava that you did your pre-run drills.
Some of you, because we've seen it, some of you actually put the pre-run drills as an activity in Strava.
Okay, well then do that if that motivates you though.
Okay,
do that if it motivates you. No, I'm serious though.
Comment.
But if you're going to look at like, okay, if I'm going to just look at the day and what can I yield from this day, it's more beneficial to do 7 minutes of pre-run, which is movement. and it's good movement and it's training you to have better movement than the 7 minutes on a run that you're not warmed up for and that you're not activated for.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess we should say we don't condone necessarily that runners have to do these things before they start running, like do this for 3 weeks and then you can go for your first run. We don't say that. We do think that it's fine to start running at the same time as starting to do these things, but it is more important to establish these things well as soon as possible than it is to get in as much running volume. You'll get the running volume. You'll get there. And you'll get there better if you do these things. Lastly, our final comment, which is a kind of cautionary note, is beware the dangers of weakness and immobility, because those are the double threat that can make your time spent doing these things not effective. So let's say, for instance, you're trying to learn some of the movement patterns, but you have really, really weak hips. And so when it comes to actually trying to execute the movements, your body's just not able to do it.
Or it cheats.
Or
and
cheats,
then something
which is
else
worse. Yes.
ends up getting overused, and then you get injured.
So what we're talking about here is if a muscle group is not functioning in its role fully, almost always in the human body, something else is going to make up for that malfunction. There's a better term for that, and I always forget what it is. But whatever is happening, if there's a weakness in the chain of movement, then it's going to likely cause some kind of cascading issue. And it may not be a major thing. We're not saying catastrophe here, but it, at the minimum, is not actually building. So this is where the PTs are the best voices for these things. And we don't have Adam on air at the moment to talk about it, but he has talked about it in the past, which is to say, one of the things that happens, a PT sits down with someone and for the first time and they're like, I've been running for 10 years, but I have this like pain that just won't go away. And he finds out, oh yeah, well the issue is you're not actually using your glutes when you're running. You're just not even using them. And it's like, well, how is that possible? And it's like, well, that's the question. How is that possible? Because you have developed some kind of weakness or immobility that has inhibited something from developing. And then you have functioned in that malfunctioning movement pattern for a long period of time. So it has become the norm for your body, which means your body has now learned to run without doing all the things it's supposed to do while running. That's a bad place to be.
Or, if you like to reframe things like me, it's an area that could be improved. Maybe someone has gone for running improperly for many years. This is just this should be super exciting. Like, there is a possibility that I could get better by just changing a couple things.
That's why you need Andy the optimist in your ear, because she is telling you how exciting is this moment when I discover that all these issues, whatever they may be, might be resolved by learning to use my muscles the way they were supposed to be used.
And how much better might I feel while I'm running?
Oh, I guarantee it'll be better. That's
it may be faster too.
So this is what you have to do now. You don't know if you have weaknesses that are inhibiting things. You probably don't know. And so first, all runners should establish a baseline of strength and mobility work that we do on a regular basis. And I'm not going to suggest that you need to be doing half an hour a day of strength and mobility, although you should probably, if you really want to.
Don't should on everyone here.
You should probably, if you really want to do this thing to the furthest possible degree, is what I was saying. But whatever the case may be, that is hard. I don't personally do that every day.
Well, there's periods, there's seasons that you do.
Yeah, it's true. So whatever the case is, runners need core strength and stability. Runners need upper leg and hip strength and stability, and runners need lower leg, ankle, and feet strength and stability. And so if you're not doing something on a regular basis to strengthen all the functional movements in those key areas, then you're risking the potential of a weakness that is hiding under the surface. So you don't know right now. You don't know if you have a weakness. One thing you can do is just work on the areas that we know are key areas to strengthen and do them regularly. And when I say regularly, I'm saying once or twice a week in each of the key areas. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time. can be 10 or 15 minutes of some kind of like core circuit routine, some kind of simple rudimentary leg strength routine. We happen to have all of those kinds of things available in the resources that we share as well here at AtoZrunning. So you can find them. Our YouTube channel has all of the routines that we have published and shared over the years you can find them on our YouTube channel. And so that's a place to start. And yes, it's true for the athletes that we coach. We have our complete library of not just our own material that we've made, but top recommendations from Jay DeSherry, from Coach Hodgkinson, from many others. And so that's a perk, I guess you could say, of working directly with someone, not just us. Others certainly do that too. And so that's an option. You can pursue those types of levels of support. Also, it's not a bad idea. We have an athlete in particular, just one comes to mind, but others do this too, who sees Adam at Endurance Rehabilitation, sees Adam quarterly. No matter what, he could feel like gold, and he still goes in to see Adam quarterly, because the thinking is, what if there's something that I can't feel yet that is causing me a problem, a small inhibition, and I should probably find out. And it has actually proven to be very valuable, because he has identified some areas. Oh, it looks like your sacrum is a little bit off. There's like all these specific things, because Adam's a PT and he knows PT things. So anyway.
So whoever your Adam is. So if you live in Colorado or you live, in another place.
Find a sports PT.
Find someone who knows running, who's a PT. And Stephanie also had suggested on the podcast, she was on our podcast the last couple of weeks. She's a specialist with backs, and she has a doctorate in physical therapy. And she had mentioned too the same thing, like, get checked. If you're about to go and do a big thing that you care a lot about, you're about to put a lot of hard work and training, it might be a good idea to invest in an assessment so you can nip any problems in the bud before you begin a huge training block that you have dreams in store for.
Yeah, that's actually how it all started for us and Adam Homolka, and then he has since grown. It's not just Adam anymore at Endurance Rehabilitation, because one day I met him and I was getting ready to run the Riverbank Run 25K US Championships, and he was like, hey, stop by, let me check you out and just kind of see if everything's moving right. And I was like, what? Is that a thing? People do that? And here we are 12 years later, and that's just a regular aspect of how we live our lives in as runners, if we can. Obviously, that's not always available to you, but at a minimum, you can start doing the kinds of things, build into your regular routine, things that help strengthen and stabilize your core, upper leg, hips, and lower leg / ankle / feet, 3 key areas, and focus on the kind of stuff that falls within the functional movements of running motion. And so not just the movement itself, but the things that have to stabilize that movement. So for instance, the reason you do core work is not because you're lifting heavy things with your abs while you're running. It's because your abs have to keep your torso stable while your legs are doing all their work moving. And so, for instance, you need to work on that kind of stuff. You need to be stable and strong. You don't have to be lifting heavy weights. You need to be stable and strong so that your body can move the way it's supposed to move.
Or maybe this is all just Andy's secret mission to normalize adults skipping and jumping around.
I don't know what you mean by that.
Because of
the pre-run drills.
Pre-run drills and jumping. Like my sister, this is just a little side note because I was thinking about it and it made me smile. My sister was asking, like, what kinds of things are you able to do? And I was like, well, I've been doing a lot of jumping. So I was doing like single leg, and then together I was doing all this
hopping is probably the right word there.
Yeah, jumping, hopping, and she's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So then we were standing at the park and we were both hopping around.
And people were looking at you strangely.
I don't know if they were. We didn't care.
Oh.
So I think we should normalize skipping and jumping.
Well, see, the problem with suggesting that is you're suggesting it's not normal. I think it's normal enough. I've seen a Zumba class before.
Yeah.
They seem to feel like they're doing normal things.
You know what? I like Zumba. I think it's a great idea. Anyway.
Okay, so that's one half of it. This other half is actually more straightforward and simple, which is mobility. You need to be able to move without something inhibiting the motion. And this is where we get into why Jay Deshairy's book was so enlightening in this area, because he actually talks about how not all immobility is the same thing or happening for the same reason. And we seem to just have this universal assumption that, oh, I'm really tight, so I'm just going to get a massage gun. That's the new one now. It used to be, I'm just going to go sit down and stretch. But now they say you're not allowed to do that anymore. It's bad. And then they said, okay, foam roller. And it was like, I'm just going to go on a foam roller. But now it's like Theragun, because someone figured out that if they could get people who like foam rollers to pay $300 more for something that does essentially the same thing, then they'll want to do it. And they made you do it. They made you buy a $300 foam roller. But I'm joking. It's more different than a foam roller, at least. So what in principle that is saying, though, is saying that all kinds of immobility are solved by the same thing, and they are not. And so some could be. And you have basically principles of like, is it something in my joint is just not, it's stiff, and that needs to just be relaxed in some sense. And there's release techniques for that, but also there's just active mobility, which helps move the joints through their range of motion, and so it loosens up the joint stiffness. And then what if it's some kind of binding in the soft tissues? And so myofascial release is key for helping with that. And that's where foam rolling came from originally. It's just a very easy way to do a kind of myofascial release. It's also not terribly effective. And so if it's especially resilient binding, then I need a little more aggressive technique. And I don't think the massage guns seem to be proving to be any more effective, although you can get to places more easily than you can with a foam roller.
And you can also do that in the car.
Yeah, so there's I'm not hating on massage guns, but there are proven techniques that are certainly worth pursuing when it comes down to it. Things like the Graston technique, which is a kind of scraping. Things like the cupping technique. There's
Try needling that we talked about in our episode with Stephanie.
I don't want to discount the most recent one shared. So all of those are more aggressive techniques, but that's because sometimes the immobility needs an aggressive solution. And what it comes down to is make mobility work just kind of something that's instinctual for you. You finish running and do just some light active mobility. You can do these walking stretches. There's a lot of them out there. Walk and do a quad stretch, then walk and do the other quad stretch and stuff like that. That's a kind of active mobility, which is just going to help get your joints moving through the range of motion. But you can also check out the active isolated flexibility routines by Phil Wharton and his father. And we have published a version of that, so you can just follow along with the whole running focused routine, things like that.
Mm-hmm. I saw a video.
You did?
That made fun of runners, and I think it's so true. A lot of times we finish our runs and we have all these ideas of things that we need to do after the run, and then it just showed the runner laying down on the couch. But
that's actually not accurate, and here's why. Because the runner isn't laying down on the couch. The runner is standing on the phone. That's what the runner is doing.
That's probably more accurate. But I did hear a couple ideas of ways to make sure that you do productive things after your runs. I just love practical takeaways, and there's a lot of that in this episode. But one is to have your post-race fuel prepared, or at least planned, so that you know exactly what you're going to intake into your body. Another thing that I heard someone say is that every time that they're in a hot shower, they do some amount of mobilization or stretching. So they have like a routine.
Let's have a big shower.
I didn't ask them exactly what their routine was in their shower, but I think that is a great idea, just to have that be part of the either after post run or even starting your day. There's just a lot. I think it's a good idea because you're warming up by having a hot shower, which I guess not everyone has hot showers these days. I know the cold shower is a thing, but for those that have hot showers, I think that's a great idea. Just something to remind you, something that's part of your routine. It doesn't cost you any additional time.
Well, I mean, you are going to take longer in the shower if you're just standing there stretching, using up all the hot water for the rest of your family members.
Oh, someone's feeling a little
better.
That's
never happened around the Ripley household. So those are good things. Hack the system is, you sit I don't have time excuse, which is a true thing. It's a real thing. I'm not discounting it. But hack the system. Find ways to make other kinds of time. If you sit in a desk for work and it's not weird to do this with other people around, make sure that you don't just sit in the same spot all the time and, get up and do a couple light stretches on a regular basis. There's other things like, have a hot pad, an electric hot pad in your home office, because you can use that to do things like heat your calf and then do some light calf stretching, all that kind of stuff. So anyway,
great idea.
There's lots of hacks. We're not going to try to spend too much time on the hacks right now, but maybe that's a future consideration. So as we have noted, we have a number of these kinds of resources also freely available to anyone who wants them. You can go to AtoZrunning.com/free to get your own copy of our pre-run routine, which is learning the movement patterns and then rehearsing them. And that will be delivered to you in the form of a video and a PDF. And many have said they really appreciate that there's a PDF, a document that they can print, because who wants to be constantly trying to find it on your phone and watching the video all the time? But you can print them all out. That's an option. Or head to our YouTube channel, AtoZrunning on YouTube, and we have a number of these strength routines and the active mobility routine all posted there as well. And you're welcome to find them. You're welcome to see them. And if you want the full package, the whole library, customized to you for your specific needs, well, you're going to find out more about how we do that on AtoZrunning.com/coaching.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Next time, we'll be talking about motivation and continuing on this conversation of starting or restarting your running.
All right. Well, let's move on now to talking about the latest in the world of running. All right. So now let's get started with some world of running stuff. Unfortunately, you have Zach solo for this segment, but we are always glad when Zach is not solo the entire time, because nobody wants to listen to only Zach all the time, right? Now, let's start by talking about some A to Z runners. Some shout outs and congratulations to our crew who are racing and doing amazing things at the Houston Marathon. Congrats to Mike for competing in the marathon. The Frostbite Relay, shout out to Dan for that. The Naples Half Marathon, shout out to Robert. The Louisiana Marathon, Craig did that one. And the Cincy Chase the Crown Elimination Tournament, shout out to Laura, who is still in the running. It's a double elimination tournament, and she's in the gauntlet right now, but she is moving up, and it's exciting. So, Laura, keep it up. That's incredible and lots of fun. It's a really cool thing. If you want to know more about the event and what they're doing, it's a very unique kind of running competition that I think is just fascinating. All right, now, quick heads up, because we also like to say what's coming. And this weekend, good luck to A to Z runners running races, in particular the Classic City Half Marathon, where Ruth is running the half. And if you're running that event, keep an eye out for Ruth as well. All right, let's talk about some of the latest news, because it was quite an exciting weekend last weekend, and we want to share some of those things. The Houston Marathon starts us off. And in fact, we're actually going to focus on the half marathon, not because the full marathon wasn't exciting, but we only have so much time and so many things to cover. So let's start by talking about the men's race, where incredible things happened. And there's a fair number of them to talk about here. First, it was an insane race. Up front, 4 guys finished within 3 seconds of each other. The first 4. As a matter of fact, the first 2 finished in the exact same second, only some hundredths apart. They crossed the line at the same time. And third and fourth were just right behind them. And so what that became was they were together the entire race, pushing each other the whole time. And the finishing stretch was like this dead sprint. All 4 of them just gunning. And it was only in the last few steps almost that the top 2 separated from the other 2. And so how exciting. It doesn't get more exciting than that, which is just really quite a thing. Who were these top 4 finishers? Well, I'm glad you asked. In 4th place was Jamal Yemer of Ethiopia. He ran 59:20. In 3rd place was Gabriel Guy of Tanzania. He ran 59:18. In 2nd place, none other than United States' own Connor Mance, who ran 59:17 to very nearly tie with Adisu Gobena of Ethiopia in the same second. Connor Mance running 59:17 for a new American record. And not just any American record. That was Ryan Hall's legendary 18 years old half marathon record, set at this same event, by the way, the Houston Half Marathon. And at the time of setting, that record was considered to just be so impressive. It was just standing head and shoulders above the rest of his compatriots at the time, which is really exciting stuff. But not only that, Ryan Hall broke a 21-year-old record, which means that Conor Mance's record is only the second time the U.S. men's half marathon record has fallen in 39 years. You do the math there. That's not a lot of records being broken here. Contrast that with the women's, which we're going to talk about, which is the complete opposite story and exciting for that reason too, which is coming shortly. And so in that race, we not only had fast running up front for a U.S. record and some fast times, as well by some international runners, but we had a number of other Americans doing things that don't generally happen in this quantity. It was noted that Joe Klecker, who was making his half marathon debut, was potentially gunning for that American record. He is coached by Dathan Ritzenhein, who is a 60 flat minute half marathon runner. If it tells you anything about Ryan Hall's record, Ritz, who also ran some of the fastest marathons and his at one point in time broke the 5,000 meter U.S. record, like things like that. You know, one of the most talented runners of his era, and yet still could not break the Ryan Hall half record. So that tells you about it. Now, Klecker did not, unfortunately, have a great time of it, have a great showing, and so he struggled a bit, especially in the latter stages, and so did not finish great. But not far behind Mance was U.S.'s Hillary Bohr in 60 minutes and 20 seconds, who, by the way, holds the U.S. 10-mile record, the official 10-mile record currently, and he ran faster than that in this half marathon. So it was unfortunately only the last few miles when he started struggling a bit more and slowed up. Otherwise, he himself was also on pace to break Ryan Hall's U.S. record. Incredible things. But behind Bohr, 5 other Americans also ran under 61 minutes in the half. That's 7 total. For reference, in an entire year, this statistic coming from the great reporting at Let's Run, and they said for an entire year, the most Americans who had ever run under 61 minutes, since 2015 at least, was 3. 3 over the whole year. And that was in 2018, by the way. That was 7 years ago. There has not been more than 2 American men under 61 minutes in a single year since 2018. And now 7 did it in one race. That was a fast day. What's incredibly interesting about this is it was not what many were calling ideal circumstances, or conditions rather, for a race, because it was very cold. It was 30-some degrees low, but then the wind chill was like down to 17 degrees. It was incredibly cold wind and quite a bit of brisk wind. And so they even mentioned like the final stages of the race, there was a really strong headwind that was just brutal. I know this from firsthand accounts because one of our runners, as I mentioned earlier, Mike, ran the marathon and said as much, that it was not the most pleasant conditions. Now, for a half, it's a little bit better than for a full because the cold is not quite as concerning in a half marathon when your body temperature, you're demanding more of your body in terms of higher degree of maximum effort because you're running harder for shorter. So that's something. Mance, by the way, did run faster than other U.S. road records, including the 15K, the 10-mile, and the 20K, and Route 2, his half-marathon record. But I do not believe any of those are official because I don't think they had official timing mats at any of those locations. Ryan Hall, I already mentioned Ryan Hall ran the previous record 18 years ago, which just tells you a lot about that Ryan Hall record. But here we are in the Super Shoe era when records tend to fall quite a bit, and it still has taken quite a while for an American to best the time. Now, let's talk about the women's race, because the men's race was exciting. The women's race was also exciting. And what we have here now is a not as close race up front, but some pretty fast times still coming down. And it was Wayne Kaladi of the United States. In finishing second, she also broke the American record, which happened to be her own record and happened to be from 1 year ago at the same event. And so Wayne Kaladi now, in a 12-month period of time, broke the U.S. half marathon record twice. So now remember the comparison. The men's record, like 39 years to break it twice. Wayne Kaladi's done that herself in only 12 months. But also the U.S. women's half marathon record has been broken 6 times in the last 3 years. and including twice by Emily Sisson. Kira D'Amato's in there, Sarah Hall's in there, and twice by Wayne Colati. And so it just continues to fall. As a matter of fact, more than a minute has been chopped off the time since 2022, only 3 years ago. Over a minute is a lot in a half marathon. And so we just see incredible improvements coming from U.S. women in the event, which is really exciting. And just a shout out to Senayet Getachew, who won the race from Ethiopia, won the race in the half marathon, finishing just a few seconds ahead of Wayne Colati, as it were. Wayne Colati's time, by the way, 66:09, 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 9 seconds. She came through halfway in just over 1 hour and 5 minutes pace. And so she did fade a little bit, which tells people maybe there's something to be gained here by dialing that balance in a little bit more, or perhaps just if she has a better second half, because apparently she was having stomach issues in the second half of the race, and that's not good. That will slow you down. So there you go. Lots to say about the Houston half. It was very exciting and lots of fun to see the results of that. Now, I want to just spitfire a whole bunch of things that are happening in global running that are interesting because there's just so much going on. And so I'll just give you some one-liners here. Josh Hoey set a new U.S. record in the 1,000-meter run and nearly broke the world record when he did it. It's number 2 all-time, 2:14 and change, very, very fast. As a matter of fact, the collegiate record was also broken in the 1,000 meter, and it's 2.5 seconds slower, or about 2.5 seconds slower. And so you can get an idea for just how fast a time Josh Hoey just ran. Also, Olympic champion Salomon Barega from Ethiopia. He won the 10,000 meters in Tokyo, and he also is one of the fastest all time in both the 5,000 and the 10,000, holding number 10 and number 12 respectively, and now is making his marathon debut, which is always exciting. You never know exactly how these things are going to go, but he certainly has all the makings of a potentially great marathoner, given his prowess on the track. So we'll wait and see, but it's exciting. He's going to do that next month in February in Zurich. So we'll have those results to share with you as well. How about this? University of Wisconsin, known to be a miler powerhouse. They have more sub-4 mile runners in a given year than most schools have in their whole history. And so UW just did it again. They sent 9 men under 4 minutes in a 1 mile at the same event over the course of 3 heats, led by Nathan Green, who is UW stud now, an NCAA legend, as it were. And he won the fast heat in a time of 3:50.74, only a few tenths slower than the collegiate record held by Cooper Tier, the NCAA record. And so there you go, Nathan Green running blisteringly fast. He beat the pros, by the way. There were professionals in the race, but he beat them. And also led his UW compatriots, schoolmates to teammates is the word I was looking for there. He led them 8 others to under 4 minute performances. Really incredible stuff. Sivan Hassan, by the way, has just announced that she intends to go for the world record in the London Marathon. Oh yes, remember that Ruth Chepngetich record of 2:09 and change? Well, Hassan said, since Ruth Chepngetich did it, it must be possible, so I'm going to do it too. And now she has said she's going to attempt it. She already is the world number 3, by the way, if you're not familiar with her storied history in the sport. She ran 2:13 and change, I believe 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago. But legendary performer, and yet finds herself not able to clinch the marathon world record because it seems to have eluded her to date. So we'll see how that goes. London Marathon is looking to be really exciting. We'll follow that closely. How about this? World champion Gudaf Sige of Ethiopia has announced that she's going for another world record in indoors as well. And this is happening also in February in the 3,000 meters. So Sige, who held or still holds, I actually off the top of my head can't recall, and I did not write it down, but world indoor records like in the 1,500 meter run, or the mile run. And so CK is no stranger to world records. She, you recall, ran 14 minutes flat in the outdoor 5,000 to set that world record. And while it is true that Beatrice Chibet has run under 14 minutes in a 5K, that's on the roads, and it does not count against a track record per se. So there you have it. And more world record attempts coming. All right, last up on my Spitfire list here, Shelby Houlihan. Do you recognize the name? Shelby Houlihan. She was banned for illegal substances in her system. Prohibited substances is the better term, in her system. And she claimed it came from eating a pork taco on a taco truck one time, or burrito or something. And you say it and you just can't help but chuckle a little bit when you say it, because really, is that a possible thing even? All the Mythbusters have attempted to set out to try to prove whether or not that could actually happen. And apparently some have proven that it could, and some have proven that it couldn't. So what are you going to do? But the point is, she had to serve a 4-year ban, which knocked her out of 2 Olympics games. She missed Tokyo with its delay, and then she also missed the most recent Olympics, wherever that was. And I have to say, this is one of the strangest situations, because here we have Paris. The Olympics were in Paris. Thank you, brain, for figuring it out eventually. Very rarely is the story ever about the athlete after they've been banned, because it's just kind of like this thing, like, it becomes a taboo. The athlete has broken the rules. Even if they're allowed to come back, who really wants to keep talking about them anyway? Now, it does happen, very rarely, but it does happen with world-class athletes now and again, where they re-enter the sport and they're still a topic of interest. So what's interesting here is Shelby Houlihan is like, people are just very interested in talking about her situation. And so unlike many of those other instances, we have a lot to think about as far as, what this means. She's going to come back. Is she going to... was she clean all along, and is it kind of like a return revenge type of dynamic, or was she guilty, and then it's kind of like tinging this a little stain on the sport to celebrate this athlete? And we just don't know, right? Because you can't know for certain, but she was found to not be able to prove herself innocent, as it were, in the arbitration. So we'll find out more about Shelby Houlihan. The point is, she is legal again. She has served her ban now, and she's back, and she's going to be competing next weekend. And so we're going to tell you how she does, because everyone is interested, apparently, in the world of running, and we want to share that with you. Last up here, now, I teased this in the introduction. Run streaks are something you have heard me, if you've been listening to the show, you've heard me express concern about the concept. A run streak, a daily run streak, is the idea of running every day for a long stretch of time without ever missing a day. And the reason why I have concerns about this is because who cares? That's my whole argument. Who cares if you have to miss a day? Because the point is, if you should miss a day, then miss it. Absolutely. And don't let things like, oh, but I have a run streak going, make you do something you should not do, which is run when you shouldn't run. And so here, from one runner to all the others, there's a time when you should run, and there's a time when you should not run. There's a time for everything under the sun. And so my concern here is that runners already have the tendency to make poor choices for poor reasons because of the nature of who we are and what we do with this sport. Poor choices like push ourselves when we shouldn't, when we should be resting, like pursuing a performance achievement that we are not ready to pursue, we're not healthy enough, life is too crazy, it's a bad time, like all the kinds of things, right? So the run streak concept is one that concerns me, and especially when it's celebrated heavily. It's one thing to just have it be a novelty. I worked with shout out to Larry. I worked with an assistant principal when I was teaching high school. He was our assistant principal, and he had many years going of a run streak, but health prevented him from being able to continue it at one point or another. It was a knee problem, I think, or a back problem. I can't recall. But in principle, he was doing the thing, and it was very, he was proud of it, and as well he should be. He was proud of the idea that he could continue to run and have this daily dedication. However, and he would say this, there were times when he chose to run when he probably should not have. Like, it was detrimental for various reasons. And that is the story of every run streaker ever. And so I maintain, why? That's the whole thing. Who cares that you ran for 55.6 years straight, 20,309 days in a row without taking a break, or missing a day, I should say. That is the run streak that John Sutherland just ended. Yes, the world record, longest active running streak. It's not active anymore, but it's now the longest retired running streak because no one yet has reached it. I think the second longest is a couple of years behind, so we got to wait a little bit and see what happens with that person. In principle, congrats to Sutherland for daily dedication for so long. That certainly has a kind of inspiring thing. However, I think you are encouraging something that is not a good idea for people to do. So I might suggest that we don't celebrate this too heavily in the running universe. So those are my thoughts. I told you in the intro we'd share the reality of it and then our thoughts. Sutherland mentioned that he ran the day that he had arthroscopic surgery once. I'm like, that's not a good idea. That's a really, really bad idea. Also, at 74 years of age, you can imagine he had all sorts of injuries, and he just would continue to run. Not always running a lot, understandably, and so just enough to call it, officially. And I don't even know if there's rules to this, because this is a thing, right? The United States Running Streak Association is a thing, for some reason, and so there's also an international one, Streak Runners International, and so there are some types of rules. By the way, Sutherland's lifetime mileage, anyone curious? 202,000 miles over the course of 55.6 years. And Cohen, he's not running anymore as far as I can tell, but he had to take some time off, ending his streak on December 31, 2024. His running streak that began on May 29th, 1969. Wow, that's such a long time. In second place currently, and now this is the currently the longest active running streak that is still active, is 54.9 years. This is Jim Pearson, and he is 80 years old. And his run streak actually began just about a year after Sutherland's, as it were, and he's been running for 20,054 days. So congrats to Sutherland. We naturally have our concerns, but people are going to do things, and it's pretty cool when you can feel proud of the level of dedication that it takes to that, and maybe still be concerned about some of the choices that. Okay, here's what it says. I was trying to find this. Through the decades of injuries, surgeries, and even smog-filled air in San Fernando Valley, Sutherland just kept showing up. Yes, you heard it. Injuries, surgeries. These are things you should not be running through in a healthy state. Okay, there you have it. And I know many of you are going to say, yes, but Zach, it was just for fun. And his goal was not to run at a highly competitive level every day of his life. And so it's okay that sometimes he ran through some things and maybe he should have rested a little bit more. Okay, I understand. Congrats to Sutherland. That's how we'll close it, because we like to close things in a positive way. And with that, the final say here is we've got a lot more content coming to you of how to help as we get started or restarted as we're running after or for the first time or after some interruption. And the reality of the situation is, whatever you find yourself, wherever you find yourself right now, if you feel like it would be helpful to have someone supporting you directly, our coaching services might be a good fit for you, and we'd encourage you to check it out. Go to AtoZrunning.com/coaching. Send us an email. We're happy to just begin the conversation and hear more about your situation, give you a chance to ask us questions and find out how we operate, what it looks like, and whether or not that could be a good fit for you. And if you happen to reach out before February 1st, you can get the first 3 months half off, which is not a bad deal either. We'll talk again soon. So thanks for listening, and see you next time.